Are you considering opening an antique or vintage booth in the year 2026? Well, if you are, I have several tips for you that I hope will help you have a successful start and a smooth journey as you get into your new antique and vintage space. In addition, I have what is a very important tidbit of information for you, which if I had known this when I started my antique and vintage reselling business, it would have made my life a whole lot easier when it came time to prepare my taxes. Okay, the first topic I want to talk about is to do your research before you commit to signing a contract. So you probably have an idea of where you might like to have an antique booth because you probably already shop at this place. So what I would do if I were you is if you have a couple of stores in mind that you're interested in possibly selling in, is to visit them frequently and not just on weekends. I would also visit the stores on weekdays to make sure that the store is getting some traffic on weekdays as well as just weekends. And then you're going to want to talk to the person at the register and just ask them if they have any antique booth space available. Don't assume that because there are no empty stalls that means that there are no spaces available. For instance, when I got started at my very first store, it appeared to me that there was no booth space available. But when I actually talked to the owner, she said, I actually do have a booth that is coming vacant at the end of this month. Also, when store owners have empty booths, a lot of times they don't want an empty booth, so they will actually fill it up with their own merchandise so that the store doesn't look empty or unwelcoming. When you talk to the person at the register, you'll get an idea pretty quickly on whether or not they are welcoming, or if they're friendly or not. The very first store I went to, I was a complete newbie. I had no experience and I did not get a very welcoming reception there, even though I had a portfolio that I had compiled of things that I wanted to sell and just pieces of furniture and pieces of decor that I thought represented my style well. So I went to a second store, and the store owner there was just incredibly welcoming and friendly. That's the store where I ended up renting my first booth. Fast forward to 2021, when I opened my second booth, I visited 3 stores. The first store, the person at the register was not very welcoming or friendly and said that she had 40 people on the waiting list for a booth. So I went to the second store. It was a similar reception. Then the third store, which is where I have the booth now, the person working the register, her name is Sandy, and she was incredibly friendly and talkative. And she handed me a business card for the store owner. And I said, oh, thank you so much. I'll give him a call. She said, why don't you call him right now? He might be able to shoot down to the store and show you the space right now. And I was like, okay. So I did. I called him and he met me the next day, showed me the booth. Same thing. He was friendly. He gave me a very good idea of what the contract was actually going to look like the main points of the contract during that first meeting, and the rest is history. I have been at that store now for 5.5 years. All right. Next, you're going to want to decide on your business model. What are you going to sell? Are you going to sell mostly furniture, or are you going to try to sell mostly smalls? If you're trying to sell furniture, you're going to have higher ticket items, but it's going to take a lot longer for those items to sell. And then you're also going to have to figure out how to get your furniture from point A to point B. So if you're doing what I was doing, I was actually flipping furniture and I was refinishing furniture when I first started using paint. So there was buying the furniture and getting it home, working on the furniture, and then getting the furniture once it was finished into the store. And that requires asking for help. It requires constantly asking someone for favors. Estate sale companies always tell you that you need to bring your own help to move furniture. If you buy furniture at thrift stores, they usually will have an employee that will put the furniture in your car for you. But basically, I was constantly having to ask for help, and the person I was asking was my husband, and he got a little bit tired of it over the years. My dream about my antique booth wasn't necessarily his dream, and I can understand that. So it was my dream for my business model to be able to make it on selling smalls alone. And that's what I'm doing now. Okay, next I want to talk about inventory. I personally would not open a booth until I had enough inventory to fill the booth. At the first store in Atlanta where I had a booth, I had to sell a substantially large piece of furniture every single month to make my rent. And then whatever I sold on top of that was my profit. So for me, when I opened up that first booth, that meant that I needed to have enough furniture to fill the whole booth. And then I placed my smalls on top of my furniture. I think I only had one or two display shelves. Now I have mostly display shelves because I'm mostly interested in selling smalls. And I would advise that you have enough inventory to fill your display shelves. You don't want to have your booth with like a coming soon sign on it for several weeks when you first start renting. I would be prepared to completely fill your booth within the first day or two of opening. My next tip for you is to do all of your prep work at home and not in the store. And basically, what I mean by this is clean and price your items at home and not in the store. Just a heads up is that when you move into an antique or vintage booth, that day is going to be an exhausting one. So you're already having to probably move furniture or set up display shelving and position all the furniture in the right places, position everything exactly how you want it. The last thing that you want is to have to sit there and write price tags and slap price tags on smalls. So you want everything to have the price tag attached to it, and you want to have done all of that at home. Of course, it's important to know what needs to be on your price tag, and that's going to vary by store. Next, let's talk a little bit about move-in day. I would advise that you have someone lined up to help you and that you not expect other people who work at the antique store to help you. So in my case, my husband has helped me and my son has also helped me when I have moved into my new spaces. Be prepared for it to be a very long day. So make sure you have food, snacks, water, coffee, whatever's going to help you get through that day, and some help to help you move furniture, to unpack boxes, and all of that good stuff. Oh, one thing I want to tell you though is that at the store that I'm currently working in, I was on a waiting list for 2.5 years to move into a downstairs booth. So we have a main floor and then we have an upstairs. The upstairs is a challenge because the customers have to climb the stairs to visit those booths, and not everybody can do that, and not everybody wants to do that. So I was on a waiting list for a while to move downstairs. And when I did finally get my downstairs booth, my husband and my son were there to help me that day, but also Vicky Patrick, who is a vendor at our store. She helped me so much that day. I would be prepared to not only be physically exhausted, but to be mentally exhausted on move-in day, because at least for me, when I'm having to make decisions on where to place things so that they look nice, or I'm trying to make vignettes on top of furniture, all of that requires a lot of mental energy on my part. So it's both mentally and physically exhausting. So Vicky, if you are watching, thank you so much for helping me that day when I moved downstairs. You don't know how much you helped. I'm struggling to like make decisions. She's just like packing things and putting them in the box so that we could get them downstairs. Again, I would not expect people that you're just meeting for the first time to offer you any help. When I moved downstairs, I had known her for 2.5 years when she offered me that help. The next thing that I have for you is to encourage you to study other people's booths. Now, I think it is completely fine to have booths that you admire and that you love and that you find attractive and welcoming and to try to model your style after those booths. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also think that if you have the opportunity to talk to the owners of those booths and just say, I really like, your setup. It looks so nice. Do you have any advice for me? Just talking to the other vendors who work there, you'll find that that is huge. They are just a wealth of information. And a lot of them have been doing this for a very long time. Even if you're not new at this, but you're new at this particular store, I think it's good to ask the people who work there what their experience has been like and to ask them for advice because even though you may have years of experience, they're the ones who have experience in that particular store. Okay, a little bit more about talking to the other vendors. You want to listen more than you talk. And you can ask them things like, what sells well for you? What doesn't sell well for you? How long have you worked here? Have you ever worked anywhere else? Or is this the only antique store you've ever worked in? Do you also sell online? Like, all these are great things. And then once you ask those questions, let them talk. If you are still in the process of trying to make the decision of where you want to rent a space, and you have some options, like for instance, for me, I didn't have a whole lot of options. The first two stores I went to told me that there was a waiting list 40 people long for a booth. But you will learn a lot by how long people have been there. Good stores with strong business leaders and strong business practices, they will have vendors who have been there 10 and 20 years. Talking to other vendors, actually listening, finding out how long they've been there, and finding out how long the store has been in business in general are all, I think, really good ideas when you get started. My next piece of advice for you is to resist the urge to over decorate or to have it absolutely perfect before you get it open. If you're going to paint the walls, I would get that done as quickly as possible and then move right in. I would not spend days and days once you've actually paid your rent and you have your booth for that month. I wouldn't spend days and days and days painting fancy stuff all over the walls. I would just make sure that your walls are clean and bright and get your stuff in. Now you can improve on your booth over time. If painting is needed, then of course that's going to be easier to do before you start moving your shelving units and your furniture in. But this reminds me when I was a teacher in middle school and I was reading a book about setting up your classroom for success. And the person who wrote the book said, don't spend hours and hours of your teacher planning week decorating your room. Their advice was just to keep it very simple and for the bulletin boards to put clean paper on them and a clean border around them and to leave them blank and let the students' work be the thing that decorated the bulletin boards. Now that could be student artwork, it could be student essays, whatever it is that the kids do in your classroom. So the same kind of goes here, I think. I think it is more important to get the booth open. Now, you do want to have everything already have its price tags on it, but get everything in the booth and at least have it to the point where you can get it open for business within 1 to 2 days. With help, I have been able to do it in 1 day each time that I have moved into a new space. But like I said, that was a very long day and I had help. So resist the urge to have everything be exactly perfect in the aesthetics or in the decorating, and just know that you can improve on the booth over time. The last thing I want to talk to you about is inventory, tax reporting, and the 1099. So your store owner will tell you right off the bat, and it will be in the contract whether or not they issue 1099s. Our store does. So when I first got started in this business, this is what I thought, and this is what was wrong. And it caused me a big headache when tax time came. I thought that all I needed was two numbers, The first number being how much I spent, and the second number being how much I made. So I thought that all I needed was a stack of receipts from the thrift stores where I shopped. And, if I went to IKEA and bought shelving units or something, or went to Hobby Lobby or Lowe's, I thought that's all I needed was a stack of those receipts and then how much I made each month on my paycheck. That is not what happened. So this is why I would recommend either talking to the person who does your taxes and finding out how they plan to deal with a business of this type where there is inventory. Or if you do your own taxes, then know what that worksheet looks like that you're going to include in your tax return. This is what caused me to sort of like be pulling my hair out at the end of my first year, is that the number that I actually needed was not just what had sold and how much I spent on the things that had sold. I actually needed to know how much I had spent on the things that remained in inventory at the end of the year. And at that time, I had just started keeping a handwritten ledger, a business ledger that I got at Walmart. So thank goodness I knew how much I had spent on every single thing that was in my booth. You're going to get an itemized list every pay period of what sold. So not only are you going to know what items sold, but you have to have a way to know what items didn't sell during the year and remain in inventory at the end of the year. So I took that handwritten ledger and I just started plugging in the numbers into Microsoft Excel, and it took me several days to accomplish that. Now that I know what's coming, of course, I stay on top of that and I know what to do. But that was the thing at the end of the first year where I saw that tax worksheet and I saw the numbers that were actually needed to report properly, and I had no idea. You will also have unsold inventory that carries over from year to year. So I still have things in my booth that are still there that I bought in 2023, and it is now 2026. So every year I'm carrying those numbers over. Now, like I said, I'm using Microsoft Excel for this process, and I know that there's an inventory software out there that would be a whole lot more user friendly for me. I just don't know what that is, but if you're watching and you have an inventory software that you could recommend to me that I check out, Microsoft Excel works, but it is very tedious. I will say that it doesn't run reports. I basically kind of have to like lump information together and create the report myself. If you are interested in learning more about how I handle my bookkeeping and how I handle my tax reporting, please go into the comments and just type books, and then I will know that you're interested in learning more about bookkeeping, and I'll do a video on that for you in the future. I'll actually go and share my screen with you and show you what that worksheet looks like that I include in my tax return. For those of you who have been missing cat of the day, I'm sorry. So I've been doing cat of the day from this lovely calendar, and I'm not going to worry about making sure the date actually matches up because the day that I'm filming this is not going to be the day that you're seeing it anyway. So I'm going to read this one for you today. Okay, so this little guy is the stray of the month. This is so appropriate. Look at the bowl he's sitting in, and look, he's got some clear glass crystal behind him. Isn't this just perfect for a video about antique stores? For a cat sitting in such an ornate vessel, we're surprised Bartleby appears to be quite the opposite of bowled over. But according to Helen Wilbur from Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, that's not unusual for the rescue kitty. As soon as I brought Bartleby through the door, he looked around and acted like he had always lived here, Helen says. He's an indoor kitty, but loves keeping track of the birds and animals around our house. Nothing bothers him, and he hasn't met a bull that he doesn't like. So there he is, sitting in that very ornate antique bowl. Well, I hope that you found today's video valuable. Even if you're not thinking about opening up a space and you are already a well-seasoned and experienced antique or vintage reseller with a booth or with an online store, let me know what you think. If I missed something that you think it would be important for people who are considering going into this business to know about, please let me know in the comments. If you disagree with me on anything, let me know that as well. I definitely encourage disagreement in the comment section, as long as it's done in a kind way and not in a rude way. Some of these comments, I'm telling you. Anyway, all right, but that's a topic for a whole nother video. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and as always, I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.